Welcome to this week's edition of Flashback Friday, your opportunity to get some good review by listening to episodes from the past that Jason has handpicked to help you today in the present and propel you into the future. Enjoy.
Speakers, publishers, consultants, coaches, and info marketers unite. The Speaking of Wealth Show is your roadmap to success and significance. Learn the latest tools, technologies, and tactics to get more bookings, sell more products, and attract more clients. If you're looking to increase your direct response sales, create a big-time personal brand, and become the go-to guru, the Speaking of Wealth Show is for you. Here's your host, Jason Hartman.
It's my pleasure to welcome Izabela Russell to the show. She is Managing Director at Music Radio Creative, and her company does all sorts of innovative audio branding services. They are for podcasters, for terrestrial radio, for different things, and it's a pleasure to have her coming to us from the Isle of Wight in the UK today. Izabela, welcome. How are you?
Thank you very much for a wonderful introduction, Jason. I'm very well indeed. How are you?
Fine, thank you. So tell us about the Isle of Wight.
Well, this
sounds like a very exotic place.
It sounds like it, and actually to us it is. It's a tiny little island just off Portsmouth or near Southampton in the UK mainland. It's a little island between the UK and France. It's kind of a really special place because you have to take a ferry to come here. There is no bridge. If you want to take a car, it takes an hour to really get here. And it's not cheap to get here either. It's actually one of the most expensive ferry crossings in the world.
How much does it cost? Wow.
Well, it can cost up to £100, which I believe is around $160 one way.
That's like a plane flight.
Wow. That's why, and considering the distance, it's just over 10 miles. It is actually classed as one of the most expensive ferry crossings. But it's worth it. If that helps, it is worth it. We've got some beautiful scenery. It's kind of like a little forgotten English place. People come here on holiday, but it feels like it is, say, 40, 50 years behind everything else with just a pace of life and everything else.
Oh, neat. Very interesting. Very interesting. Well, that's what the internet allows us to do. Live in lifestyle-oriented places and do business all over the world. Tell us a little bit about your recent conference that you hosted. You've got one coming up next year as well. Tell us about that. What happened? What were some of the great ideas and takeaways from that? And then I want to talk about audio branding.
The UK Podcasters is my husband's and mine latest venture, shall I say. And it started off actually with our friends in the US. So I can say it is all your fault. We've been involved with podcasting for a good part of the last 2 years through our business, Music Radio Creative. And it kind of grew on us. And the more we were involved, the more we wanted, really. And we were attending all of those conferences in the US, the New Media Expo. And every time we were coming back home, we were just like, oh, there's nothing we've got in here. We've got to wait another year to connect with those fantastic like-minded people, and we don't have anything like that going on here. So then the idea was born that, well, why won't we actually see what is happening in the UK and in Europe and see whether we can bring that or create that community in here. We've created our first meetup. That was March this year, and we found that, well, actually there are people who are podcasting and who are interested in growing their podcast and utilizing it as a brilliant way to connect with customers, fans, or whoever else they want to connect with. So we started to look further and we thought, okay, well, we will organize a conference. And that was UK Port 14. And it happened in August this year. And it was fantastic. I mean, firstly, it was brilliant to see how many really focused people there are in the UK. One of the main challenges we faced was the fact that BBC kind of set that image of podcasting as, just a place for geeks.
I think the old media empire is getting pretty surprised.
I think so.
Yeah.
I think so. But BBC hasn't done us a favor in the sense that they really set that expectation to the public, and that's actually till today how they paint the podcasting picture in general. Quite a lot of people who, when we started to advertise the conference, they were just thinking like that. They were like, okay, so is this going to be for that kind of just bunch of hobbyists, just geeks who want to come in and meet together, and that's that. And we were very focused, and we said, well, actually, no, we would like this conference to be the place for like-minded podcasters to connect together and essentially give their business a voice. So it was very targeted at people who want to utilize podcasting for their business in one form or another. So either they have existing business and they would like to start to podcast to expand, just use podcasting as a content management tool, or who want to start a podcast and build a business around that. Yeah. So very, very focused niche of people.
Podcasting is a real business, and I think that's a great takeaway. And what were you going to say about that, though?
Well, I was just going to say that it just essentially enabled us to bring really good speakers to the conference, because obviously there was also value to them in attending a place where it's relevant to what they do. But the main takeaway for us personally was the fact that there is a great interest in podcasting for business, and that niche is rapidly growing.
It really is. Any great tips or tools that were talked about at the conference?
So many.
I know. That's like asking a fire hose, right?
So many. I mean, we've had some brilliant sessions from just talk about content marketing strategy. So creating the full strategy of content marketing. That was delivered by John Baskell, who actually came all the way from Sweden to talk about that, and some brilliant takeaways there. And it's just the main part of that was that you really need to look at the full marketing mix. So you can't look at the podcasting in isolation. You have to look at everything you've got to offer in order to make this to work, because I think so many people just think, okay, I'm going to start a podcast and I'm suddenly going to be a millionaire. It doesn't work like that. And I think just having the full overview of everything you do and bringing that marketing mix together can really make it a success.
Yeah. Let's talk about, just some of your general ideas and things that you see podcasters doing right and wrong out there, and then can maybe funnel that down to on the audio side specifically. But I wanted to ask it more generally first, Izabela, of what you think some of the best practices are.
Some of the best podcasts in general, pay attention to detail. And when I say that, it's just from the branding point of view. It's just the visual aspect of the brand, but also the user experience that they provide to someone who, say, goes to their website. Just that the overall package is just constructed in a way that it works. But it does require attention to detail. And unfortunately, not everyone has it.
So what are some of the details that podcasters are missing?
For example, you have every podcaster, I would at least hope so, has a call to action they give to their listeners at each episode. When that person lands on the website, so say I'm going to say go to my website.com and sign up to my mailing list, for example. And then I go to that website and the last thing I can find in there is that call to action. So there is no consistency between what I've been just told on the podcast and what I can see on the website. So it's just making that path really easy to follow, making that call to action stand out and making it consistent with the message on the podcast. That's one example.
Tying those things together. Very good point.
Yeah.
From an audio branding perspective, what are some of the things that you're doing? You certainly do intros, but what I like is that you do this holistic sort of brand analysis and consultation, right?
Yes.
Tell us about that.
It's a branding consultation. And essentially what we try to do is, rather than look at the audio aspect of your brand in isolation, we would like to make sure it actually ties in with all the other aspects of your brand. Because brand is also visual. It's also how you write things, the language that you put across in the written word. So it's just looking at all of those different elements and making sure that they speak to each other. So, because the last thing you want is mixed message sent through to your listener through incorrect branding. What we do is we just look in just a general full overview at, okay, how does your podcast brand look like? What experience do I have when I land on your website? What kind of feelings do I have? Because that's very important for audio specifically, is what feelings your brand actually gives the listeners.
How do you control or imply a feeling to the listener?
Well, in audio terms, it's fairly easy. I mean, how many times, you watch the movie and there is this end piece of music and it's just everyone is in tears. It's not only what's happening on the screen, but it's also what music is played at the same time. And that's exactly the same thing. So you want the listener to listen to your podcast and have the same feeling as they have when, say, they, for example, look at your podcast artwork. It has to be consistent and has to at least try to give the same message across.
How do you do that, though, when it comes to the audio portion? Certainly, we all know that certain songs make us feel one way or another, although I'm not certain, and I'm sure there's a lot of psychology behind this, maybe some experts out there who analyze this stuff, especially nowadays with the tools we've got in terms of the functional MRIs. I think over the coming years, Izabela, we're going to see some phenomenal research, And this is where, they can play different songs and different music for someone inside of an MRI machine. And in real time, they can see which areas of their brain light up. Is it the happiness area, the sadness area, the erotic area? It's just amazing. I mean, it's almost mind reading. It's not quite mind reading, but almost,
I wish we could go as advanced as that.
Yeah. It's getting there. I mean, and I'm wondering, how do you pick a song when it's always got to be royalty-free music, right? Or how do you pick that music?
We have access to a very comprehensive library. So the choice is really not the problem. The method, however, it really is different depending on exactly what we are looking for. Say, for example, first of all, it's not only the music, it's also the voice we are going to use, the tone of the voice as well. So the voice artist who's going to read the script for your intro, for example, needs to really work together with that music piece. But also the script itself. So we would look at script and make sure that the way it's written, it already sets the scene for that emotion. Then the voice artist delivers it the way that emotion is emphasized. And then the music needs to highlight that full experience. As to the process, but there is not exact science because every single brand is different. Right. So it's not something that you can apply a mathematical sort of form to and just say, okay, if this, then that, if that, then this, and just follow that. It's not as straightforward as that. But majority of what we base that on is simply our experience and experience of our producers. So, for example, producers that we work with, majority of them have musical experience. And what that gives us is it gives us ability to actually look at, okay, well, what instruments in isolation are used typically for what types of music, for example. A rock guitar can have a very specific emotion and very specific feeling. So we know that if we use a music piece with that particular instrument, it's going to deliver a specific feeling at least. So there's quite a lot of different elements that come with it. It's not only one person working on a project like that. As I said, there is also a producer who has a say and advises during the journey. But it's definitely a process that's very creative as well in nature. So it's the same as you would, have an artwork designed. For example, you rely on someone's experience as to, okay, what color is the best for my brand? What font do we use? And things like that. So there are quite a lot of elements that we need to take into account when coming with that final music solution. It's not just a matter of, okay, this really needs to feel professional. It needs to give me confidence. I need to feel like, this is someone who really knows what they're talking about. It just fills me with total confidence and kind of a safe feeling in your heart that, okay, this is brilliant. This is where I need to be. This is someone I want to follow. It's not only the feeling, it's also everything else, as I say, that comes with it. So what script what we are going to tell in that message, how we are going to deliver it, and where it's going to be played.
So what are some of the elements of an intro script? What should the podcaster want to convey in that script? Should they want to convey their resume, their credibility level? Why should they be talking about the given subject? Or are they trying to convey, this is what the listener will get out of the show? I'll tell you one of my frustrations, Izabela. As a podcast consumer, I go around and I'll listen to these different podcasts, and some of them just don't get to the point. I mean, it is amazing how the chit chat and the what am I, I keep asking myself sometime, and maybe I'm just too type A. It could be just my own personal thing. I want to know right up front, what am I going to get out of this? What can I expect? And then I want them to actually deliver that.
Unfortunately, not everyone can be or should be podcasting. But to answer your question, I think that the intro intro itself, I mean, to start with, you have approximately 30 seconds to grab someone's attention. If someone is tuning in for the very first time, if in the first 30 seconds you're not going to impress them or give them the information as to what they can expect happens next, that's it. They can easily switch off. You are boring, that's it, next. So I would say, firstly, don't make it longer than 30 seconds. Anything longer is definitely too long because it's just about getting to the point, as you say.
Now, is that 30 seconds of voice and music, or is that 30 seconds of voice and the music can be a little bit longer on either side?
I would say just everything. So that should be the full intro. I don't think it should be longer than that. The key message to send across, in my opinion, is what podcast someone is listening to. So the name of the podcast, name of the host would be great. Although it doesn't have to be included in the intro, because then you are coming in as a podcast host and you are introducing yourself anyway. There are two schools of thought. One is that you can make it just literally that, make it a full branding experience and simply introduce, just like when you turn a radio station and you have a new program coming up, they don't have a long intro for every program. There is just literally the name of the program coming up and a little bit of production value added on top of that. So that's one school of thought. And the advantage of that is that then you come in straight after that. And what you can do as a host is give a brief 15, 20-second snippet as to what you are going to talk about in this episode. So it's just literally brands the podcast. Then you come in and say, okay, in this episode, we are going to talk about X, Y, and Z. And I'm the host. My name is Izabela Russell. Welcome to the show. And you go right in. So it's fairly tight. It's very good for podcasters with established audiences. At a certain point, you get to the listening figures, you notice that more or less they had the same every single month. So the likelihood is majority of those listens comes from returning listeners. So you don't have to sell them the podcast every time. They already sold on it.
Right.
So once that time comes, having that short branding formula, I think, is the best thing you can do. The second school of thought is having the descriptive one. So that's what you've described at the beginning, is just having, although still 30 seconds, which is approximately 90 words. And then having a little bit more information. So giving maybe a tagline from the show, or just one sentence as to what the show is about, what the main mission statement is, what is it you want to give to people, and then go with the same formulas to introduce the episode, introduce yourself, and go right in. So I am a fan really of keeping things tight because of the fact that attention span of someone who's tuning in for the first time is very, very short. And it is in your interest as a podcaster to make that experience as smooth as possible.
What about other audio branding messages throughout one's show? There's the intro, there's the outro, there are bumpers in between, there are commercials in between, or some sort of informational segment. It's not part of the actual show. Kind of outline those different elements, if you would, for our audience, and then let's talk about each of them.
In my opinion, the second most important part of the branding would be the outro. I think this is where you want to give call to action. At that point, someone has finished listening and they are ready to do something next. I'm a firm believer that call to action should be always one in each episode and always highlighted at the end in the outro. If you give call to action, I've heard that many times, and every single time I cringe. Someone, just tune into the intro is, okay, now follow me on Facebook, follow me on Twitter, like me on Facebook, find me on LinkedIn. This is my website, sign up to mailing list, and you have this massive shopping list. And they haven't even tuned into the podcast. They don't even know what the podcast is about.
Wow, yeah.
It's not the time to sell yourself. The selling part is the content. And at the very end, you have ability to say, okay, if you've enjoyed it, this is what I would like you to do. So that's the outro. You have bumpers. I think they are great if your podcast is a fairly long one. So if you have, say, 45 minutes or more, it's a nice way to break the different topics. So if you have different segments, rather than just pausing or suddenly saying, okay, and now we are going to talk about tip of the week. It's nice not to have to do that and have audio do that for you. One of the most common mistakes I have seen is podcaster announcing the break and then having a bumper announcing the break. So you end up having a podcaster saying, okay, coming up next is the tip of the week. And then there's a bumper coming in with a voiceover saying tip of the week on, so-and-so show. If you use it, just use it. You don't have to announce it too. And then you have commercials or ads that you've mentioned too. Now, to be honest with you, it really depends, in my opinion, as to what audience you have, how established you are, and how much you are willing to put in terms of other audio into your podcast. Mm-hmm. I think there always should be a balance. So say, for example, if you have 30 minutes of a show, I don't think you should go for over 10% of branding elements into that show. So 3 minutes. If you put any more, I think you are just overdoing it. Mm-hmm. Listeners come in to listen to you. Obviously, adverts are maybe relevant to them, but at some point, they want more of the content from you.
Well, you know what's interesting about that is if you look at, and I don't know how it is in the UK, but in the US, talk radio here, I mean, it's gotten absurdly ridiculous on terrestrial radio, where you get 18 to 22 minutes of non-content per hour. The actual content from the talk show host here is, maybe 38 minutes to 42 minutes per hour.
That's crazy.
It's unbelievable. The number of commercials. I think listeners are just fed up with that. People don't just want to listen to commercials all day long. Various other station breaks and identifiers and things like that. In podcasting, though, it seems rather unfair. And, I don't really do advertising on my podcast, at least not directly, at least not at this time, I have to say, although I've explored it and continue to explore it. But podcasters are held really to a much higher standard in a way. There. It's a little bit unfair. If a podcaster put that much in terms of non-content into their show, I mean, people would have a fit.
They would. And I'm probably going to be shooting myself in the foot now since I'm making jingles and commercials, right? Mm-hmm. But actually, I am a big fan of having a podcaster talking about the product. Brilliant example of that is what Pat Flynn does on Ask Pat. He doesn't have recorded commercials. He will talk about the product himself. And I think that really is the key. If as a podcaster, you can talk about the product confidently and you can truly recommend it, I think you will sell it far better than any advert will. That's first. And secondly, your listener will not feel as if they have been interrupted. That's worth to consider too.
Well, this has been an interesting discussion. Izabela, give out your website and tell people where they can find out more.
It's musicradiocreative.com. Again, it's musicradiocreative.com. That's where the magic happens with audio. If you would like to connect with me personally, the best way to do it is via Twitter. And it's simply my name and surname, which is Izabela Russell. I'm sure that, Jason, you will do an excellent job in linking that in the show notes.
Absolutely. And Izabela, I'll tell you, if I had you on my podcast, I would just listen to those jingles over and over again because I love the accent.
I'm very pleased to hear that.
And it's just funny to me that you say you like my accent. I think that's crazy.
It's mutual love. That's what it is.
Well, it was great talking to you and having you on the show today. Folks, check out Music Radio Creative. And Izabela, we appreciate the insights.
Thank you very much, Jason.
Copyright the Hartman Media Company. For publication rights and interviews, please email media@jasonhartman.com. This show offers very general information. Opinions of guests are their own. Nothing contained herein should be considered personalized, personal, financial, investment, legal, or tax advice. Every investor's strategy and goals are unique. You should consult with a licensed real estate broker or agent or other licensed investment, tax, and/or legal advisor before relying on any information contained herein. Information is not guaranteed. Please call 714-820-4200 and visit www.jasonhartman.com for additional disclaimers, disclosures, and questions.